But there's a more serious matter as well for the king. He's been called on to formally apologise for the effects of colonisation and to pay reparations. Indigenous leaders from 12 Commonwealth countries have written to the new monarch asking him to acknowledge the impacts of genocide and slavery. And representatives from Australia, New Zealand and Canada also demanded the return of stolen artefacts. This comes as just weeks after Charles expressed his support for research into the historical links between the British monarchy and slavery. I go with Rishi Sunak's view on this, which is that I don't think it's worth unpicking our history piece by piece in order to arrive at a conclusion that you've already reached in any event, which is that, you know, some bad stuff happened a long time ago. Britain was very, very much in the forefront of getting rid of slavery around the world. There were probably some people that suffered as a result of some things that went on. Was it down to the royal family? Was it down to various commercial organisations? Was it down to, you know, business people who went to some of these countries and basically enslaved people to work for them to make money?
The royal family was one of the biggest slave owners.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody was a slave owner in those days. And so, you know...
But not nearly as many slaves as the royal family.
Well, yeah, but it's not a competition, is all I'm saying. I think once you start getting into talking about reparations and returning artefacts, you know, you could go all the way back to the Romans and you can say that the Romans killed some of my ancestors. I don't know whether they did or not. I want some money from Italy. I just think it's a bad place to go. I just don't think you get anywhere with it.
If you've apologised to a certain portion of the country for things, then if you're going to apologise to one, you apologise to all, because they feel less than now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but do they? I mean, but everybody's got a problem in their history,
Think about the Aborigines. They were only stopped being tortured in the 60s.
Yeah.
So
by Australians, though. By Australians.
But most of the people had English heritage.
Well, they might have had, but the point is, you know, a lot of Scottish people went to New Zealand. You know, a lot of Scottish people went to Canada. But, you know, in the end, they were also Canadians by then, and they were doing things in the name of all sorts of stuff, not necessarily just in the name of the royal family. I think that, you know, if Rishi Sunak can say that we don't need to do it as the Prime Minister, I don't see why everybody else can't just go along with that view. We know that there were bad things, but you can't make them better.
The problem is that the effects of colonisation and slavery are still being felt today. And that's the issue, is that it's not about unpicking our history, it's actually about acknowledging our history, teaching it in schools, not pulling down statues of slave owners, actually, but putting up plaques that say, this person was this is what they did.
But that's very different for talking about reparations.
Let me finish.
Isn't it?
When it comes to the effects of slavery, that has manifested itself in poorer outcomes for black and brown people in this country, institutionalised racism in the police force and then the NHS.
But
that is the hangover. That is the hangover.
Hang on for a second. There are better outcomes for people from those ethnic minorities than there are in many of the countries that their original ancestors came from. There are pretty poor outcomes for black people in Africa as well. You know, it's not just in Britain, there are poorer outcomes.
I'm going to finish my point because I'll let you finish. That is the hangover, thank you, that is the hangover from colonialism and slavery that is being felt today. Now, the United Kingdom, when it was part of lots of people that abolished slavery in 1833, paid reparations to people that enslaved people, to the slave owners. But no reparations were paid to the enslaved people. So the people who lost their stock, their commodity, were paid to the tune of £300 million in today's money. That was £20 million back in 1833. Now, the UK only finished paying back that debt in 2015, but nothing was paid to the people that were enslaved and their ancestors. Now, I know that if you try and calculate that, that's probably estimated to be about £14 trillion. It's incalculable because of the amount of people who were enslaved and the amount of ancestors.
Now, I'm not necessarily
exactly. You need to. You're absolutely right, Sharon. We need to acknowledge the harm that was done. No. We need a full and frank apology, not just.
Well, what sort of apology would you like?
Not just about enslaved Africans, but Aborigines.
He's already apologised.
People in Canada, the terrible things that happen with children's homes. All these things
we haven't heard
need to be. All these things need to be apologised.
All over the world,
hang on.
Right?
Just let's hear from Ian.
I hear what Afua is saying, the idea of the knock-on effect. I mean, with respect, that is a theory. It's not always corroborated. Some people think that. There are other people, black people, many people in other countries and this country that don't quite share that view. I don't think it's it's hard to get your head around the fact this was barbaric stuff. I don't think anybody on the planet would go, no, actually, it was okay back then. No member of the proletariat, whatever colour they were back then, were doing particularly well out of things, whether you were stuffed up the chimney, put on a boat, whatever the hell happened to you, your lot was not particularly good if you were living under the kind of authoritarian rich and the bourgeoisie and all the rest of it. But I think there's been quite a lot of apologies over the years. You know, it has been acknowledged. I think everybody gets that it was a terrible time. Nobody's saying it was anything but. So I just don't know where we would go with it now. What
but
we would
isn't
do
it interesting
Finish it.
that
Finish
Charles
it. You
does,
started it with some apologies. Finish it. Talk about it and let it move on.
Yeah, but this is my point. Reparations would take it into a worse place, I think. And I think you can't do that. You know, there were Scottish people killed in their sleep at Culloden by the English. You know, I wouldn't know who to claim
What
from
about
there
the Irish,
because,
then?
you know, well, what about the Irish?
Yeah.
What about the French? What about every single person on the planet who is related to somebody who was done wrong at some point in our history?
Which is probably the reason why there isn't a straight.
We've all been
case
stuck
of
at some
yeah.
point, you know.
But the difference is a lot of these, you know, whether it's Caribbean islands, or, you know, wherever it is, that island never recovered because it was, you know, its economy was raped and pillaged, its people were raped and pillaged, and it never bounced back. And a lot of the, you know, if you're talking about, people have tried to make a comparison with the Holocaust, which is very different when it comes to reparations. And so I think it's interesting that Charles obviously wants to have this conversation. He understands the significance. He understands that Commonwealth is in a very precarious position.
But he's got to be careful how he does it, is what I think. And
Yes, of
obviously,
course. No,
you
he
know,
does.
It doesn't. Also, people need to also remember that it wasn't all in one way bad. There were some good things about the colonisation that went on as well.